السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا حبيبي يا رسول الله صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم. All praise is due to Allah, the Creator, the Sustainer. Peace, blessings and salutations upon the greatest of His creation, Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, we are on the last part of chapter 7, and inshallah we'll terminate with this chapter and continue thereafter with chapter 8. Just to refresh, that we just finished the Battle of Badr in 4 parts, and remember that the Battle of Badr took place in the 2nd year after migration. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, if you have been following this series of lectures, I'm sure you will recall that we discussed in regard to Surah Lahab, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab, perished were the hands of Abu Lahab, and so was he perished. Meaning that Abu Lahab was destroyed and so were his hands. Learn from the ayah of the Holy Quran. In this part, we will start off with the discussion as to what happened with Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab was informed of the Quraysh's defeat after not being present at the Battle of Badr. We did discuss that he was one of those who did not attend the Battle of Badr. The rest, Umayyah bin Khalf, Abu Jahl, all these kuffar of the Quraysh had attended the Battle of Badr. And when he was informed, Abu Lahab slipped into a deep depression and was later sick with chicken pox. And this sickness of chicken pox caused his entire body to rot. Allahu Akbar. Remember that the Quranic verse has been revealed regarding this man. And whilst he was, as I mentioned, in the deep depression, he was later sick with chicken pox, which caused his whole body to rot. And Abu Lahab died on the 8th day of this sickness. Now you must know that chicken pox was very much feared by the Arabs, who regarded chicken pox was very much feared by the Arabs at that time. And this sickness of chicken pox, whoever died with it, they regarded that person unlucky. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, the Arabs feared chicken pox very much, and understand that this chicken pox was taken as to whoever died, they regarded those who died from it as unlucky. As a result, not even the children of Abu Lahab had touched his body for a period of 3 days, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. They eventually carried his body with sticks after fearing being taunted by people, pushed it into a pit, dug by them and poured sand over to cover. And some historians are of the opinion that people stood from far and threw stones in the pit to cover the body. Allahu Akbar. Why? Because remember that he was the enemy of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Just to rephrase and just to repeat what we discussed in regard to Abu Lahab, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, he was not present at the Battle of Badr. And when he was informed of the Quraysh's defeat, he slipped into a deep depression and was later sick with chicken pox, causing his entire body to rot. And he died on the 8th day of this sickness. And chicken pox was feared by the Arabs, who regarded those who died from it as unlucky. And as a result, not even the children of Abu Lahab had touched his body for a period of 3 days. And eventually, they carried his body with sticks after fearing being taunted by people, pushed it into a pit dug by them, and poured sand over to cover it. Some historians are of the opinion that people stood from far and threw stones into the pit to cover the body. Allahu Akbar. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, this was the result of the same Abu Lahab who used to trouble the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he was the same Abu Lahab when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gathered the people and told them in regard to, if I had to tell you that there is an army which is to attack you and it is waiting behind a mountain, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, Abu Lahab, when he was told that the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that I am the Nabi of Allah, and I warn you of the punishment of Allah, become believers or you will receive his punishment. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, the same Abu Lahab was very, very angry and said to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, may you perish, may you be destroyed. And this was the reason that the verse was revealed. I did mention, we did cover this in the previous chapters. Remember again, that those enemies of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, surely there is no good for them in this world and in the hereafter. We as Muslims should make sure that we are portraying, we are displaying the image of a Muslim. We are following the Quran and the Hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. As you can see that Abu Lahab troubled the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam so much, and there was no benefit for him in this world or the hereafter. And he was the same person, as I just mentioned just now, that when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam climbed onto the mountain of Safa and gathered the Quraysh before him, saying that, oh my people, if I had to say that behind this mountain is an army waiting to attack you, would you believe me? They replied, yes. But when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that if this is so, then I warn you of the punishment of Allah, become believers or you will receive his punishment. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, Abu Lahab was part of it, and he spoke ill of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Nevertheless, you can see that what a death he died, that he died with that death which the Arab feared and regarded it as unlucky, that his body even started to rot, and people who are not even burying his own children, not even the children of Abu Lahab had touched his body for a period of 3 days, and they eventually carried it with sticks. So this was the result of Abu Lahab and how he died, and such a death, may Allah save us from a disgraceful death, inshallah, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. Surely this is something to take lesson from. Moving on, I mentioned that there are 2 ghazwats which I will mention details of, and thereafter few points and we will terminate. There was the ghazwa, the battle of Banu Qainqa, and this took place when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam returned to Medina from Badr in Ramadan of the 2nd year after migration. Remember that they were there in Ramadan for the battle of Badr. And after a short while, on the 5th of Shawwal, in the second year after migration, you can see that how busy the Prophet ﷺ was, as we discussed before, with the battles in the life of Medina. On the 5th of Shawwal, the Ghazwa of Banu Qainqa took place. And as mentioned before, there were 3 tribes of Jews, the Banu Qainqa, Nadir and Qurayza, who were living in Medina, in the vicinity of Medina. An agreement was made by them with the Muslims. And it was first broken by the Banu Qainqa, who are the most affluent and powerful tribe amongst the Jews of Medina. And this Ghazwa occurred, understand that this Ghazwa, this battle occurred when a veiled Arab woman went out for shopping in the Jews' marketplace. A shop owner mischievously began to undo her clothing and thereafter made her naked. Allahu Akbar, astaghfirullah. And this drove every Jew who saw this to laughter. And the lady then screamed for help and was heard by an Arab who approached and killed the shop owner, causing a fight to break out between the Jews and the Arabs. And when Rasulullah Sallallahu, Alaihi Wasallam heard of this, he proceeded to the Jews and rebuked them of the immoral activities, causing an enraged Banu Qainqa to reply that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, don't become arrogant because of your victory at Badr. You are facing the Makkah army who don't know the art of war. That's why you won against them. If you challenge us, we will not be tread upon, and will demonstrate to you how to be victorious in battle. Allahu Akbar. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, the Prophet ﷺ proceeded to speak to them, and this is the answer he gets, that don't become arrogant. Astaghfirullah, ma'azallah. The Prophet ﷺ never had such a character of arrogance. And after breaking the agreement, the Jews were attacked by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the middle of Shawwal, in the second year after migration, on a Saturday. And the Jews, why were they attacked? You can see the reason, that they did such immoral activities with that veiled woman. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, may Allah safeguard our woman of the Muslim Ummah, inshaAllah. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, the Jews were attacked by the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the middle of Shawwal, in the second year after migration, on a Saturday. But the Jews could not match the Muslims in combat and locked themselves up in their forts, and after a siege of 15 days, eventually lost the battle and were forced to concede defeat. Allahu Akbar, subhanallah. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, they could not match the Muslims in combat and lock themselves up in their forts, and after a siege of 15 days eventually lost the battle and were forced to concede defeat. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam consulted the companions as to what should be done, and it was ultimately decided that they be exiled from Medina, and that was the reason that the Banu Qainqa proceeded to live in Azra'at, an area in Syria, following their banishment and reason of what they did and their immoral activities. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, so much of distress was caused to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but they sacrificed their time, their lives for the sake of Islam. May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala guide us all to sacrifice our time for the sake of Islam. Continuing, there was another Ghazwa which was known as the Ghazwa of Sawiq. And what is Sawiq? We will come to it at a later stage as to the reason why it was called the Ghazwa of Sawiq. As previously mentioned, every individual of Makkah was in mourning for their leaders of Badr and wanted revenge for their killings, resulting in the battles of Uhud and Sawiq. We will discuss the battle of Uhud further, but mentioning about Sawiq, Abu Sufyan had now become the most prominent leader of Makkah after the deaths of Utbah and Abu Jahl in Badr, which we learned. And he was responsible for the important duty as leader of Makkah to avenge the people killed in the battle by the Muslims. And this led to him taking a vow to not put oil on his hair or make ghusl after impurity until revenge has been taken for those killed by the Muslims. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, he took a vow not to put oil in his hair or make ghusl after impurity, after being impure, until revenge has been taken for those killed by the Muslims. Therefore, 2 months after the battle in Dhul Hijjah, in the second year after migration, Abu Sufyan set out to Medina with an army consisting of 270 soldiers on horsebacks. And he was knowing that the Jews would support him in battle. He was hoping and knowing that the Jews will support him in battle, as we learned in the previous parts. He firstly met with Hayy ibn Aqtab to gain his allegiance. Yet unfortunately for him, he did not want any part of the battle and did not even open the door of his house. Following the disappointing meeting, Abu Sufyan then met with the leader of the Jewish tribe of the Banu Nadir, whose name was Salam bin Mashkam, who was also the manager of the Jewish treasury. And he honorably welcomed him and informed him of the Prophet Sallallahu, Alaihi Wasallam's military secrets. And at dawn, Abu Sufyan attacked Arid, which is a village 3 miles from Medina, a village 3 miles from Medina, and made an Ansari Sahabi as a Sa'ad ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala shaheed. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, he left 2 months later in Dhul Hijjah with 270 soldiers, hoping that the Jews will help him. Hayy ibn Aqtab did not even open his door for him. But then, when he met Salam ibn Mashkam, who was the leader of the Jewish tribe of the Banu Nadir, he welcomed him and informed him of the Prophet's military secrets. And at dawn, Abu Sufyan attacked Arid, the village 3 miles from Medina, and made an Ansari Sahabi as Sa'ad ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu shaheed. And he also brought down a few trees and setting fire to some gardens and homes of the village, thinking that he had avenged the slain in Badr by doing so. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, you must know that gardens were very essential at that time, and he put them on fire. He also put some homes in fire. But when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was informed of this, he proceeded to confront Abu Sufyan, who became afraid and turned to escape the advancing Muslim army. To gain speed, he threw sacks of the food for the soldiers off the horses, which were later picked by the Muslims. And in Arabic, that food was known as sawiq. The food was known as sawiq. And sawiq is that food which is made of flour, and water. And Abu Sufyan, when he saw the Muslim army advancing, he got afraid and turned to escape the advancing Muslim army, and to gain speed he threw the sacks of food for the soldiers off the horses, which were later picked up by the Muslims. And in Arabic it is called sawiq, and that is the reason why the battle was known as the Battle of Sawiq. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, these were the 2 battles which I wanted to mention after the death of Abu Lahab in this part of the chapter. We covered the death of Abu Lahab, the Ghazwa of Banu Qainqa, and now the Ghazwa of Sawiq. As we can see that companions have been sacrificed in these wars, as Sa'ad ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala was made shaheed. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, moving on with a few more points in regard to the second year after migration. In the second year after migration, the marriage of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha and the beloved daughter of the Prophet, the Sayyidah Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha, who was the beloved daughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, the marriage took place with her to Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala an in the second year after migration. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, the marriage of Sayyidah Fatima to Hazrat Ali had taken place in the second year after migration. And how was the ceremony? As we discussed of our marriages today, this was a simple ceremony which took place with a lot of dignity. Allahu Akbar, subhanallah. Such an example to us then how we must do our weddings today and how we must do our marriages of our children today, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. The Prophet Sallallahu ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam ordered Hazrat Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu to invite Hazrat Abu Bakr, Uthman, Hazrat Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf and other Ansar and Muhajirin Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. And when all had gathered, delivered a khutbah, performed the nikah, and gave Sayyidah Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha the following items: a small blanket, a bedstand, a quilt, a leather bag for water, 2 pulleys, and 2 jugs made of clay. Allahu Akbar, subhanallah. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ordered Hazrat Anas radiallahu ta'ala to invite Hazrat Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf and other Ansar and Muhajirin Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. And when all had gathered, he delivered a khutbah, performed the nikah, and gave Sayyidah Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha the following items, which was a small blanket, a bedstand, a quilt, a leather bag for water, 2 pulleys, and 2 jugs made of clay. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. Such a simple nikah which took place. May Allah guide us to follow the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Hazrat Harith bin Nu'man thereafter presented the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with a house of his for Sayyidah Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha and Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu to live in. Subhanallah. And when she entered a new home after marriage, Rasulullah Sallallahu Ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam visited her after Isha Salah, requested for water in a dish, gargled his blessed mouth with it and sprinkled it on the shoulders and chests of Hazrat Ali and Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, and thereafter making the following dua that, "Oh Allah, I hand over Fatima, Ali and their children in your protection. Indeed, they are saved from the mischief of shaitan." Subhanallah. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, look at the companions' love for the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam, that he presented Rasulullah Sallallahu Ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam with a house of his for Sayyidah Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha and Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And when she entered the house after marriage, Rasulullah Sallallahu Ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam visited her after Isha Salah, requesting for water in a dish, gargled his mouth, blessed mouth with it, and sprinkled it onto the shoulders and chest of Hazrat Ali and Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, and thereafter making dua that, "Oh Allah, I hand over Fatima, Ali and their children in your protection. Indeed, they are saved from the mischief of shaitan." Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. May Allah guide us to take lesson from this simple marriage of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha to Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, before I terminate, there are 5 miscellaneous events which also took place in the second year after migration. In the second year after migration, fasting and zakat became farz upon the Muslims. Fasting and zakat became farz upon the Muslims in the second year after migration. And the second event which also took place was that Rasulullah Sallallahu Ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam performed the first Eid al-Fitr Salah with the congregation in the Eidgah. And prior to this, there was no Eid Salah. So this was also an event which took place in the second year after migration. The third event was that Sadaqah al-Fitr was also ordered to be given. The fourth event was that on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam performed Eid Salah, which we know as Bakri Eid today. And after performing Eid Salah, he sacrificed 2 rams thereafter in the second year after migration. And also the other events which we haven't discussed, but the Ghazwa of Karkarul Qadr, Bahran, and other small Ghazwat also took place, which the Prophet ﷺ attended, as that is the meaning of Ghazwa, but there was no fighting which had taken place. So these were the other miscellaneous events which took place in the second year after migration. Fasting and zakat became first. Eid al-Fitr Salah was performed as a congregation. Sadaqah al-Fitr was ordered to be given. On the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, Eid Salah was performed and 2 rams were sacrificed. And other ghazwat such as the Karkarul Qadr, Bahran, and other small ghazwat took place, and the Prophet ﷺ attended those, but there was no fighting which took place. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, this brings us to the end of chapter 7. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept whatever has been said. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me if I made any mistakes during the recitation of the Quran, the translation of the Quran, the explanation of the Quran, the narration of the hadith, or mentioning the names of the companions, or mentioning the Seerah. If I made any mistake, I ask Allah to forgive me for that mistake, and may Allah for any mistake, and may I make tawbah in the court of Allah. I make tawbah and ask Allah to accept my tawbah. If I made any mistake in the Seerah, I ask Allah once again that I make tawbah, and Allah should accept my tawbah and forgive me if I made any mistake. May Allah guide us all to follow the Quran and the hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to perform our 5 times salah with Jamaat. May Allah guide us to take lesson from the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May Allah guide us. May Allah guide us to follow the 5 fundamentals of Islam. May Allah keep us firm on the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaat. And when we leave from this world, we leave with the kalima La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Wa ma tawfiqi illa billah. Astaghfirullah wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.